From humorless comedies to bad action scenes, these movies should be far away from your watch list. Here are the worst Netflix original movies ever, starting with The Ridiculous Six, a Western comedy that is anything but funny. This Adam Sandler production is a Western spoof that misses the mark on every level.
When we were first doing it in the daytime, I kept getting choked up. I think it was just being at SNL and being in the place that I hung with the man. But yeah, Farley was the guy that we all just said, well, he's the funniest. Now who's next?
The movie follows the story of six half-brothers who set out to find their deadbeat father, a notorious outlaw. While the concept may seem interesting on paper, the execution is an utter disaster. The jokes are crass and unfunny. The plot is nonsensical, and the acting is embarrassingly bad. But that's not all. The movie also caused controversy for its portrayal of Native Americans. It showed them playing stereotypical roles, including a character named Beaver Breath. This led to many accusations of racism and insensitivity, and the movie was heavily criticized by the Native American community. It's no surprise that The Ridiculous Six has a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and was widely panned by critics. It's a prime example of a movie that should have never been made in the first place. But this isn't the only flop movie Sandler has. Despite having many top movies, he can also add Sandy Wexler to his list of bad movies. This is a comedy drama about a talent manager, played by Sandler, who represents a group of eccentric clients in 1990s Hollywood. But instead of being funny or even remotely interesting, the movie is just painfully dull and dry. The jokes fall flat, the characters are one-dimensional, and the story seems so fake that it's hard to care about any of it. No offense to Sandler, but I think we all agree that he can do way better.
Yeah, I think the Today Show or Good Morning America, just a show, a morning show. We're in the car, we're driving to New York City, you know how you make the rounds, and we got a movie coming out. So we're pulling up the street, I see a bunch of guys on the street.
His performance isn't that good, and the rest of the cast, including Jennifer Hudson and Kevin James, are wasted in their roles. The movie is supposed to be a nostalgic love letter to the 90s, but it feels more like a sad attempt at it. To make matters worse, it received a dismal rating of 26% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a clear indication of just how bad this movie is. The consensus among critics was that the movie was a bloated and unfunny mess, with Sandler's performance one of his worst ones yet. It's a shame, because Sandler has had some great comedies in the past, but this is not one of them. Speaking of movies that make you wonder why they even got made, I have Bright, a movie that had potential but ultimately fell short. Starring Will Smith and Joel Edgerton, it's set in a world where humans coexist with mythical creatures like elves and orcs. The plot follows a human cop and his orc partner as they try to protect a magical wand from falling into the wrong hands. Despite the interesting plotline, the movie falls flat on its face. The plot could have been way better, and the characters are so one-dimensional that it's hard to care about them.
Wildly unique, you know, and I love that feeling where it kind of takes a minute to get settled into the world. You have no clue where you are when the movie starts, and David Ayer doesn't.
The dialogue is clunky, the pacing is uneven, and the action scenes are forgettable. To make matters worse, the movie was criticized for its problematic portrayal of race. The orcs in the movie are treated as a marginalized group and are often subjected to discrimination and prejudice. However, the movie's attempts to address real-world issues come across as clumsy and heavy-handed, and it's hard to take them seriously. It was heavily promoted by Netflix and had a big budget, but it was widely panned by critics and audiences alike. It received a 26% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, with many critics calling it a poorly executed film. The next movie is sadly also a failure of another great actress, Anne Hathaway. The Last Thing He Wanted is a movie that made viewers want to turn off their Netflix and do anything else. Directed by Dee Reese and starring Anne Hathaway and Ben Affleck, it's based on a novel by Joan Didion, but the movie adaptation is a disaster. The plot follows a journalist who quits her job to take care of her ailing father, and then gets caught up in an arms deal in Central America. Sounds interesting, right? Well, the movie manages to make this fascinating plot confusing and unwatchable. The editing is jarring, the pacing is slow, and the characters are underdeveloped. Anne Hathaway, who's usually a fantastic actress, delivers a wooden and unconvincing performance.
Are in this story, and that feeling of loving your father, resenting your father, hating your father, because of where he's led you, trying not to judge your father, and ultimately trying to do what Dee's talking about.
It was universally criticized by critics and viewers alike. It currently holds a dismal 4% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is one of the lowest ratings for any Netflix original movie. It's the kind of movie that makes you want to ask for your time back, which is saying something. The next one on the list was supposed to be a war movie, which automatically means it was meant to tug at our heartstrings. I'm sad to say that it did anything but that. The Outsider is a Netflix movie starring Jared Leto. This is one of Leto's less popular movies. It's about an American soldier who stays in Japan after World War II and joins the Yakuza. If you thought war movies were boring, this is the perfect one to strengthen your case.
The first time that I've ever starred in a huge film like this. My whole career, I've made mostly independent films and made a career out of playing smaller parts, but this is like the first time I've ever starred in a big...
In the movie, Leto's central performance seems to be all about making the weirdest choice possible at every turn. Just based on the story, this movie could have been great, but critics were left with nothing good to say. Variety said that the movie was boring, tasteless, and fundamentally clueless. They also said that Leto's acting seemed disengaged. But I think it's too soon to call it the worst one yet. Father of the Year is a movie that's so bad that it's almost unbelievable. It received a measly 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. That's right, not a single positive review out of 11 total reviews. So, what makes Father of the Year so bad? Well, where do I even begin? The movie is supposed to be a comedy, but the jokes are cringeworthy and often fall flat. The characters barely have any depth, making it hard to care about any of them. The acting is subpar, even from experienced actors like David Spade and Nat Faxon. But perhaps the biggest issue with Father of the Year is the plot. It follows a group of college friends who get into a debate about whose father would win in a fight. And then one of them convinces his dad to actually fight his friend's dad. The plot was already ridiculous, but what made it even worse was poor execution. And the movie just got worse from there. Lastly, this movie was supposed to be a Polish version of the erotic thriller 50 Shades of Grey, but I don't think it came even close. The 365 Days trilogy has received a lot of criticism for its problematic and disturbing themes, as well as its poor production quality. The movie is centered around a young woman who's kidnapped by a mafia boss and given 365 days to fall in love with him. While the movie claims to be a romance, it's more like a disturbing story of Stockholm Syndrome, where the victim falls in love with her captor. The movie also received backlash for its depiction of violence, as some scenes showed non-consensual aggressive behavior towards the female lead. These scenes were not only uncomfortable to watch, but also normalized abusive behavior in relationships. Plus, the movie was poorly executed in terms of acting, writing, and production value. The dialogue was cheesy, the acting was wooden, and the cinematography was mediocre at best. The only thing the movie seemed to have going for it was its steamy scenes, but even those were poorly executed and lacked any real chemistry between the actors. As for its rating, 365 Days has a 3.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb and a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This shows just how poorly received the movie was by audiences and critics alike. That's it for all of the worst Netflix originals for today.